Good morning and welcome to the class. So today we will start off with our first chapter under the unit reproduction. Okay, so this chapter is called as reproduction in organisms, and in this particular chapter we are going to talk about the basic uh, importance of what reproduction is. At the same time, we also tried to talk about the different types of reproduction, like the asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Okay, so we will start off learning what exactly lifespan is. I'm sure you would have discussed about various organisms or plants or animals lifespan. What exactly are you learning by what lifespan is? Life is basically defined. I'm sure you have learnt it already in your last year. Life is something where the organism has consciousness, the organism has the ability to reproduce, has lot of activities like breathing, eating, and so on. Therefore, we always say that lifespan is basically that time duration after birth, say till death. Now that is what we call as lifespan. You know what? Lifespan is something which is very important for us to know various things around us. Say for example, if I want to know which is the age for that organism to grow in size, or if I would like to find out if this organism, say a plant, is say giving rise to flowers. In any such case, I should always know the age of that particular organism. And also, lifespan will give me a rough estimate under which phase the organism is. Okay, now you might have seen when we discuss about lifespans that there are lifespans which are just few hours, and there are few organisms whose lifespan is quite long, few hundreds of years. So just I'll give you one example. When there is rain and we have this small worms and flies which go near the light. Okay, in Kannada we call them as the Deepada Hulu. Whenever there is rain, you see that they just go near the light, and they kind of increase in number. They keep you know uh, alive, keep moving from here to there, and after some time, within say 6 to 8 hours, you see that they lose their feathers and they're going to die. Yes, if you just notice that that organism, they have a very short lifespan, maybe few hours. However, within those few hours, you would be surprised to know that they would divide, that they would increase in number, they would increase in size, they would make their wings strong. At the same time, they will also lose their wings. They come down, they sexually reproduce, they lay eggs, and they're going to die. So within few hours, you see that they die. But however, the eggs which they lay, for them to hatch and give rise to a new fly, it takes enormous time. Okay. Similarly, I'm sure you would know that there are many organisms who survive for a very long time. Now, when I say very long time, it can be hundreds of years, thousands of years. I'm sure you know about this Doddaladmara Mara that we have right now in Bangalore. It is there from so many hundreds of years, and we are very happy with that. Yes, we go there as a picnic spot, and we always wonder, oh my God, how can this tree survive for such a long time? So many thousands of years. So this is something that is always kind of questioning us to find out what is importance of life. At the same time, what is the importance of lifespan? But let me tell you one very nice and interesting thing here. Whether an organism survive for few hours or few years or few hundreds of years, every organism would like to give birth to its offspring. would like to give birth to its child. Okay, a rose tree would give birth to a small rose tree, a fly would give rise to a smaller fly, a butterfly would give rise to a butterfly, a human would give rise to a human, and this is what that is innate in us. When I say in us, I would like to say that in all the organisms. Okay, now all this is something that is very well in us. You see that these organisms are present to give birth to young ones. And you know why they do that? Because no organism is actually immortal. Any organism, you take any plant, you take any animal, all of them, they survive for a period of time, and after that period of time they are going to die. This is something which is very well seen around us. Okay, that's the reality. Okay, you can be sure that the organism can be born. You can also be sure that the organism would have a lifespan of few years or few hours or whatever, but after that time the organism is going to die. In spite of all this, the organism is going to survive on this planet, and that happens because every organism, innate organism, has this ability to reproduce, right? And that reproduction keeps all the life forms available on this planet Earth, right? So this is such a beautiful concept that we always take it for granted, but we are really not very sure whether it has to be really taken for granted, because with lot of changes and lot of things around us, many things are changing. Now, with this introduction of what exactly lifespan is, let us go further and talk about one more aspect of today's class, which is reproduction in organisms. Now, let us see what reproduction actually means. When we're talking about reproduction, uh, there is something that we say it as a biological process. It's a process that happens in all the organisms, where any organism, be it a plant, be it an animal, be it a microorganism, it would grow and give rise to young ones. Now this young ones which is formed here is called as offspring. The young ones is what we call as offspring. Now, generally, you see that the offspring resembles the parents. In the case of small organisms, say like amoeba, or go for a much smaller organisms like bacteria, you see that there is only one single cell, and this single cell gives rise to two daughter cells, or I would say two offsprings. Now, if you might notice that these two offsprings are exactly like the mother cell. Whereas in the case of higher organisms, higher plants, even there is offspring. There is lot of relation, lot of similarities from the offspring to that of the parents. But you see that there is very small amount of differences, and this small amount of differences is very important for that new offspring to adapt to the environment. It is also important for the organism to kind of uh, grow well, okay, kind of adjust to all the changes happening in its environment, and many more. And all these aspects, we are going to learn very much in our genetics and evolution unit, where we talk about the molecular inheritance. Okay, so basically we say that reproduction is a biological process where an organism would give rise to a new organism, offspring, right? Now, when we learn about organism and organisms reproduction, we are focusing only on the reproduction in this particular chapter, not talking about anything else. You would see that there are so many types of reproduction. There is asexual, broadly categorized as asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, and vegetative propagation. So the whole of reproduction that we talk about can be classified as the asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, and then we will also talk about one more type of reproduction. We will discuss why it is so in some time, which we call as the vegetative propagation. So these are the things that we would like to know. Now, if you just look at all these three types, when I'm talking about asexual reproduction, we have many types of sexual reproduction. When I'm talking about sexual reproduction, again I see a good number of varieties of asexual sexual reproduction, and in vegetative propagation also we have so many types of vegetative propagations. Now, if the organism's main aim is just to divide into two or to give rise to a new offspring, why are there so many types? Is the first question. Now, to answer that, we would always say that we have so much of diversity around us, and each organism has its own habitat and its own requirements to survive, and therefore you also notice that each organism has the ability to divide and reproduce as per its requirements. And though we say that there are many types of reproduction, they are broadly categorized into two types: the sexual reproduction and the asexual reproduction. When we are talking about asexual reproduction, it is always that we see a reproduction happening only with a single parent. Okay, so we'll have one single parent, and that single parent cell would increase in size and would divide into two parts. Okay, now that is what we call as asexual reproduction, but not always it is like that, because you see that when asexual reproduction happens, the offsprings are just like the parent. Now that is very good, but many times we want some kind of changes, some kind of variations to be seen in the organism, and that is facilitated by the second method of reproduction, which is called as the sexual reproduction. Okay, so these are the two types, and then there is one which I have written as vegetative propagation. Yes, I would like to debate on this because this is a kind of part of asexual reproduction, and we would like to see what where exactly this would fit in, whether it is in asexual or sexual reproduction. So let us start learning more about asexual reproduction. Now, we have already seen what asexual reproduction means. So, here we will always have only one parent, we will have a single parent, and this single parent is capable of producing the offspring. Okay, now so we will have, let me say, one parent, and this would give rise to two daughter cells or two offsprings. Now, these organisms, let us call this as A, B, and let me call this as A prime. A prime is the parent cell. You see that A prime is equal to A is equal to B. They are genetically identical, right? They are genetically identical. They are physiologically identical. They carry out the same chemical reactions. Everything is the same. Okay, it is just like they are the exact copies of the parent. Now, such organisms which are genetically, physiologically, morphologically same, okay, such organisms we are genetically similar, physiologically similar, morphologically similar. Such cells, such group of cells, we call them as the clone. So, clone is basically a group of cells which are genetically, physiologically and morphologically identical with each other. And most of the times we do see that whenever there is a sexual reproduction, there is always, always, the formation of a clone. Asexual reproduction is, I would say, the most widespread type of reproduction. Okay, this is very common amongst all the single-celled organisms. Uh, if you take any kind of single-celled organisms, like you can take Monera, or you can take common in monerans, they are very common in protists. You see the organism here in all these monerans and protists, they would just divide into two cells. Okay, so they are all basically capable of cell division. They are also capable of dividing into two so that they have one offspring. Okay, now when we are talking about this kind of cell divisions, we should know about one of the most important type of asexual reproduction, which is called as the binary fission. See, binary means two, fission is breaking. So one single organism would just break into two. So such a kind of cell division is what we call as the binary fission. Okay, for example, I would like to take amoeba, right? And then in the case of amoeba, you see that the amoeba has a nucleus. Now this would grow in size, would increase in size, and at some point the cell divides that it's time for it to reproduce. The cell divides, it's time for it to divide. And when it does so, you see that the whole organism would kind of divide into two. You see that the nucleus, one single nucleus would break into two of them. In the process, you see that the end of the process would give me two cells. Now this kind of cell division, where there are two genetically identical daughter cells, is what we call as the binary fission. So binary fission is the most common type of asexual reproduction, very commonly seen in all the monerans like bacteria or few of the protists like amoeba or even paramecium. Okay, here the cell grows in size very quickly, very rapidly. It grows into an adult. It decides to become two, and you see the reproduction happening. Now this is one easier method, very common method of asexual reproduction. Now let us see the second method of asexual reproduction, and that is also something which we know very well, and that is with respect to the formation of something that we call as buds. Okay, now what exactly are we talking about buds? I'm sure we all of us have seen yeast cells which have a very good nucleus. Now this single cell, when it is kind of quite big, when this is decided to mature, we spoke about the lifespan. When the lifespan is right for it to increase in size and divide, you see that this grows, and a very small region of the yeast cell would kind of show a small outgrowth. Okay, it would show a very small outgrowth, and that is what we call as the bud. Now initially the bud is completely dependent on this particular parent cell. It stays there for some time, and when it is quite some time, quite mature, the bud gets pinched off from the mother cell, and the bud develops into a new organism. So that is what we call as the buds. Very commonly seen in yeast cell, uh, widely seen in yeast cell, and that also gives rise to something called as scars. The region where the bud grows, that is still taken as a mark on the surface of the yeast, and we call that as the scars. So that is the second type of asexual reproduction. Okay, now let us go slightly further and see how how asexual reproduction happens in slightly different organisms. Let us talk about fungi. Okay, let us take the example of few fungi, and let me say we will take the example of few plants. I would put it as algae. Okay, the very lower form of the plant. You know, these also reproduce asexually. But the best part is these both fungi and algae, they have some special structures. Okay, so they have a special structure that is completely designated for the sexual reproduction. Okay, now these organisms have special structures and they produce very small motile structures, and those motile structures we call them as zoospores. Zoo because they can move, spores because they are very small and are involved in reproduction. So these are called as zoospores. They are moving, okay, and these zoospores would kind of move, go to a new place and start growing there. Some of them, they also have special structures like conidia. Okay, conidia is basically a cone-like structure. Okay, conidia. Some of them will have structures which we call as buds, and very few of them will also have structures which are called as the gemmules. Now, these are the structures through which most of the fungi and the simple plants would actually divide. Okay, how exactly are these structures? Now, if you just look at the zoospore, we will have one organism, and inside this organism we would have small cells. Okay, we will call this as small cells, and each of these small cells, you know, they have some kind of similar structures like flagella, and because of the help of the flagella they would start moving. So they would get separated from here, so there would be one single cell, right? There would be one single cell with flagella. Because of flagella they move and they bring about motility, and therefore they go to the right place and then they would go and reproduce there. Okay, sometimes I told you that there is something called as conidia. Conidia is very commonly seen in conidia is very commonly seen in a structure like penicillium. So here we have a cell, and inside this cell you see that there would be some kind of structures like this, and these structures would actually hold few small structures on which there would be spores present here. Now these spores are what we call as the conidia, right? So conidia is also very commonly seen in fungi. Then we talk about buds. Buds is one more very commonly seen method of reproduction. I'm sure we all of us would have studied about hydra. So we have this hydra, and then you see at one particular position this would give rise to bud. The bud is there attached to the mother for some time till it gets matured, and after that it gets moving away from the mother plant and survives on its own. That is buds. And then we have this gemmules. You know, gemmules are actually very pretty to look at. Uh, so we have gemmules that are produced in sponges. You know sponges? I'm sure last year diversity we have studied about porifera and all of them. So gemmules are seen in this sponges. Okay, so what we generally have is we generally have a small structure here. a kind of sac-like structure, and this sac-like structure is made up of all the kind of small spore-like structures which have the ability to kind of give rise to new organisms, and these are what we call as the gemmules. Now just to see that the gemmules are kind of protected and not harmed, you see that they have a outer sheath, and this outer sheath is kind of um, protected by various structures to see that the gemmules are not eaten up by any other smaller organisms. So this is one way of reproduction in the case of fungi and algae, right? So this is something that I would write it here as the formation of the zoospores, the conidia, the buds, or the gemmules. So now let us see, is there any other asexual reproduction that we can think of other than this? So I wrote about one more thing which is called as vegetative reproduction. Now vegetative reproduction is kind of asexual, but it is seen not in lower organisms, but it is seen in higher plants. Okay, so vegetative propagation can be included as uh, a type of asexual reproduction. Okay, now here I am sure we have learnt that there are many types. So we have types which we call as the runner, then we have the sucker, then we have the rhizome, right? Then we also learnt about the tuber, then offset. So we have learnt about all this in our first year classes. Then we have also something that we call as the bulb of an onion, the bulb. So all these are that we call as vegetative reproduction. Now these are places where it actually helps in propagating some kind of reproduction. We call them as vegetative propagules. Okay, we call them as vegetative propagules, and again I can always club vegetative propagation under asexual reproduction, because the whole definition of asexual reproduction is that there is no involvement of two parents. However, this is slightly offbeat because here the organism, only some part of it gets kind of more matured, very much like the zoospores and the conidia. Uh, Many times you would also have seen something that we grow from the nodes. Have you learnt about this bryophyllum? Bryophyllum is where the leaf, you just take the part of the leaf, put it in the soil, it grows into a new plant. So we have bryophyllum which has the ability to where ability of the leaf to grow into a complete plant. In fact, that kind of totipotency, or the ability for the plant to grow into a complete plant from any part of the plant, is so widely used. In fact, we have one complete branch of biotechnology dedicated for increasing the plant number using this technology. We call that as plant tissue culture. So plant tissue culture is something that we very commonly do in vegetative reproduction. Okay, so all these are the types of uh, asexual reproduction, but let us not stop it at this, because along with this there are many other small variants of reproduction. I am sure you would have studied about fragmentation as one technique, where one organism divides into so many fragments, and each fragment has the ability to give rise to a new organism. Or we can also see various other types of reproduction, where you take a potato piece, cut out the eyes, and you keep it, you see that the plant can grow. Then we have the rhizomes of banana, which is a part of our asexual reproduction, vegetative propagation. So you have many types of asexual reproduction. Okay, though many of them are actually angiosperms, they are all able to give rise to a nice functional seed. You see, they do have lot of methods of vegetative reproduction, and all this is just to see that the species continues to exist. Now, if this is a condition for those organisms where the sexes are actually not separate, we would really want to know what would happen when the sexes are separate, and that is our next part of our study, which is called as the sexual reproduction. So in our next class, let us kind of quickly go through what are the important aspects of sexual reproduction. Okay, so have a nice time. I hope you do not have any doubts. If you have any doubts, please do make a note of that, and we can have a discussion. See you.